Former Red Arrow's pilot Justin Hughes. The standard you measure yourself against is high. The debriefing is fairly brutal, not in an aggressive way, but in that the team measure their own standards against much higher standards than are measured externally. The public's opinion is not what we're measuring. We're measuring something way, way higher. In The Real McCaw, the all-black captain tells Greg McGee of a childhood spent in the remote reaches of Hakata Ramia, up the Waitaki Valley, on the edge of the earth. Specifically, he tells the story of a conversation he had with his Uncle Bigsy, one that was to change his life. "Do you want to be in all black?" his uncle asked. "Oh yeah." So they mapped out how to do it, writing down a series of goals that included the Canterbury under-21s, the Canterbury provincial team, and the All Blacks in 2004. "You don't just want to be in all black," Uncle Bigsy told McCall, according to the book. "You want to be a great all black. Sign it," he said, indicating the list. "Sign it, great all black." GAB, McCall somewhat sheepishly wrote, before hiding the note in his room when the farm in Hakata Ramia was sold. McCall came back to clear out his room and found the piece of paper stuck on the back of the wardrobe. He realized he'd beaten all the targets he'd set, becoming an all-black 3 years ahead of schedule. Yet things were not good. The All Blacks had just lost the Rugby World Cup quarterfinal against France. McCaw's legacy was on the line, his place in the team. He hadn't yet reached his goal. What would a GAB do? He asked himself. Muhammad Ali began calling himself the greatest before he had any real fight. "It's the repetition of affirmation that leads to belief," he says, "and once that belief becomes a deep conviction, things begin to happen." Daniel Kahneman reminds us that these affirmations don't even need to be true. A message, unless it is immediately rejected as a lie, will have the same effect on the associative system, regardless of its reliability. Whether the story is true or believable matters little, if at all. By setting even the most unrealistic self-expectation, the aversion to the failure of not reaching the goal is much stronger, even than the desire to reach it. It seems that even in Nobel Prize-winning economics, the cliches are true. If you can conceive and believe, you can achieve. Visualize to actualize. Fake it till you make it. The truth is that the story we tell about our life becomes the story of our life. The narrative we tell our team, business, brand, organization, or family becomes the story others eventually tell about us. The internalized narrative, triggered by words, images, movement, and memory, is a phenomenon popularly known as a self-fulfilling prophecy. First defined in 1949 by Robert K. Merton as a false definition of the situation evoking new behaviors which make the original conception come true. The term is more commonly used these days as a kind of a warning. He said, "Bad things would happen, and so bad things happen." But the reverse, as shown by McCall, is just as true. Say you'll be a GAB and you might just become one. Kahneman posits two interrelated psychological observations that help explain this: anchoring and priming. Anchoring is most easily understood by recalling the tricks employed by supermarkets, shysters, and salespeople everywhere. "Normally 20 pounds, the huckster shouts. "For you, I'll give it to you for 5 pounds. Bargain." The anchoring of perceptions, normally 20 pounds, bargain, makes the lower number seem cheaper. Priming is perhaps more surprising. In 1996, John Barr, a social psychologist from New York University, tested what is known as the eidometer effect, a reflexive response in which actions subconsciously follow thoughts. In a now legendary experiment, he gave groups of participants single-word flashcards and asked them to construct some simple sentences. Buried within some of the group's cards were single-word synonyms for age. bald, wrinkle, gray, arthritis, Florida, forgetful. After completing their sentences, the groups, some of whom had used the age-related flashcards, and others who had not, were then asked to walk along a corridor and sign out, which is when the real experiment began. The progress down the corridor was timed, and something remarkable was discovered. Those in the groups who had been working with the words connoting age, arthritis, Florida, forgetful, walked more slowly. They walked more slowly. The suggestion of age, just the merest idea processed on an unconscious level, led to a reflexive response that had them display the physical behavior of the elderly. It's called the Florida effect, and though the results are still being debated, it indicates that perhaps our sense of free will is neither free nor always willful, but rather a response to the stimulus around us, to our physical and psychological environment, to the way our world is posted through language. It is a response to a story. In Bruce Chatwin's book, The Song Lines, he explores the Koori, Australian Aboriginal, belief that as young men go walk about, the words they chant sing their world into existence. The tribal songs learned on their mothers' laps and the other more sacred songs taught by their fathers, and the semicircles of Kora Bori are chanted and hummed as the initiates walk their song lines. With the words they sing come images, new ancient landscapes of their mind's eye. The dream becoming the reality, the word made world. Chatwin also reminds us that the ancient Egyptians believed that the seat of the soul is our tongue. Using it as our rudder and words as our oar, we steer our way across the waters to our destiny. From ancient theology to contemporary psychology, our words shape our story, and this story becomes the framework for our behaviors. And our behaviors determine the way we lead our life and the way we run our organizations. Richie McCaw tells Greg McGee that he has always kept a notebook. It's a working document, a library of affirmations, mantras, notes to self, reminders, exhortations, expectations, anchors, and priming words. Need to be positive and keep belief with the boys with what we're doing. Physicality is the key. Positive mentality in how we're going to play. On game day, the first words in McCaw's book are always the same. Start again. A reminder that you have to prove yourself again today. From McCaw, if it's not written, it's not real. The truth is, we don't so much tell stories as stories tell us. Our narratives frame and structure our lives, becoming the prism through which we perceive and live. Ira Glass, the host of U.S. radio show This American Life, expresses it perfectly. Great stories happen to those who tell them, and vice versa. This is true for both individuals and organizations. Dr. Pamela Rutledge, director of the Media Psychology Research Center, says, stories are how we think. They are how we make meaning of life. Call them schemas, scripts, cognitive maps, mental models, metaphors, or narratives. Stories are how we explain how things work, how we make decisions, how we justify our decisions, how we persuade others, how we understand our place in the world, create our identities, and define and teach social values. This has particular relevance to leadership today, argues John Cotter, culture change guru and former professor at Harvard Business School. We learn best and change from hearing stories that strike a chord with us. Those in leadership positions who fail to grasp or use the power of stories risk failure for their companies or for themselves. The language we use embeds itself and becomes action, so it is critical to respect it, shape it, and deploy it strategically. The filmmaker Robert Rodriguez once wrote that the first step to becoming a Hollywood director is to get a business card with the word director printed under your name. Apple set out to put a dent in the universe, and it did. Richie McCaw set out to become a great all-black. In the lead-up to the Rugby World Cup, The All Blacks set themselves an internal challenge to be the best rugby team there has ever been. Wahaya te iti kaborangi ki te tuobo koe, maybe moanga teti. Aim for the highest cloud, so that if you miss it, you will hit a lofty mountain. It wasn't about boasting. In fact, it was the opposite. It was the team's equivalent of GAB, the highest cloud, a benchmark, what Jim Collins would call a big, hairy, audacious goal. It's just because a natural part of what we did. It just became a natural part of what we did, said Graham Henry. So that's everyone's expectations in that group were the ultimate. And they spoke and walked that way. Judge yourself against the world's best, Sean Fitzpatrick tells his audience, without question. Embrace expectations. By embracing our fear of failure, we can lift our performance. Using a healthy loss aversion to motivate us. Equally, it pays to hoist our sights if we aspire to be world class, to create for ourselves a narrative of extreme, even unrealistic ambition. Doesn't even matter if it's true or reasonable or possible. It only matters that we do it. In this way, we set our internal and team benchmarks to the ultimate. Inspiring leaders use bold, even unrealistic goals to lift their game, and the power of storytelling to sing their world into existence. They tell great, vivid, epic stories of what is possible to themselves and their teams, and soon the world repeats the story back to them. Embrace expectations. Aim for the highest cloud. Kia wakan gauri. Ao ia hau. Let us prepare ourselves for the fray. Chapter 8, Preparation. Ko te piko o te mahuri tera te tupo o te rakau. The way the sapling is shaped determines how the tree grows. Train to win. Practice under pressure. Shepherd Street, Bowral, New South Wales, Australia, 1915. A different sport, another lesson. A small boy is playing cricket alone in a backyard. The sound of ball on bat echoes over the neighborhood, rebounding over ordinary weatherboard bungalows in an ordinary Australian town. The bat is a cricket stump. The ball is a golf ball. The boy throws the ball against a curved, corrugated wall. Each time he throws it, flies off at a different random angle. Sometimes he cuts, sometimes he blocks, sometimes he drives. Every time, though, he hits the ball. Every time. The boy does this every morning, every afternoon, every day, and every year for a decade. In his first game for the local school, age 12, he scores 115, not out. In the return match, his captain retires him on 72. For the third match, the opposing captain refuses to field a team if he is selected. A few years later, during his first season of club cricket, the boy scores 995 runs in just 9 innings. In 1927, he plays his first-class match. The next year, he plays for his country. 20 years later, he retires with an average test score of 99.94, dismissed 1 run short of an extraordinary career average of 100. The boy's name was Donald Bradman, the finest sportsman of any generation. Bradman learned his trade on the back streets of Bowral by bouncing a golf ball off a corrugated wall and hitting it back with a cricket stump. He made practice his test. Practice with intensity to develop the mindset to win, the All Blacks say. It's a methodology called Train to Win, and Graham Henry describes it as one of the key strategic pillars that propelled his team to World Cup victory. We talked about leadership and expectation, a learning environment, and those sorts of things. We were handling pressure, and that involved a lot of pretty simple brain biology and how the brain works under stress and how you handle that stress. The training, decision-making wise, should be harder than the game, says Wayne Smith. So you try an overlying principle of throwing problems at them. Unexpected events, forcing them to solve the problems. Like Bradman's corrugated wall, Patrick McKendry in the New Zealand Herald described the final full training session before an All Blacks match. Training on Thursdays is all about intensity. The players don't stop for mistakes as they once did. They reason, quite rightly, that opposition teams don't stop for All Blacks' errors. They try to take advantage of them, so they should train that way. We wanted to replicate playing conditions, says Smith. I used to constantly try and put Jimmy Cohen under pressure by telling him they were going to score against him at training, to replicate what it's going to be like on the field. He explains by throwing all sorts of problem-solving situations at them and randomizing situations. We found we were getting better long-term learning. If you are not overextending yourself, you're not going to get much learning. There's no point in ducking the challenges. Arnold Schwarzenegger calls it reps. There are no shortcuts, he says in Total Recall, his autobiography. It took hundreds and even thousands of repetitions for me to learn to hit a great three-quarter back pose, dance the tango in True Lies, paint a beautiful birthday card, and say, I'll be back, just the right way. No matter what you do in life, it's either reps or mileage. And the best kind of practice involves intensity, getting out of your comfort zone, extending yourself. And a phrase heard around the All Blacks camp, if you're not growing anywhere, you're not going anywhere. The fight is won or lost, says Muhammad Ali, far away from witnesses behind the lines, in the gym, and out there on the road, well before I dance under the lights. When coaching the Japan speed skating team in the 1990s, Dr. Izuma Tabata observed the short, intense training sessions were as effective as longer, more languid sessions in building both anaerobic capacity and VO2 max, key indicators of fitness. A test